Please do something. I cried out in desperation, but both my mother-in-law and husband ignored me. They didn't even look at me as I stood there, covered in blood. They seemed more worried about the scary dog that had bitten me and whether the floor was dirty. Left with no choice, I called an ambulance myself and was taken away alone. I couldn't stop crying during the ride to the hospital. After a while, my husband called. He was yelling in a panic. "Hey, turn the ambulance around. My mother is." My name is Julie Andrews, and I'm 37 years old. 5 years ago, a friend dragged me to a mixer, a social gathering with civil servants. She insisted, "Julie, you're coming, right?" That's where I met my husband, Scott, who is 5 years younger than me. My dad is a judo instructor and my mom teaches physical education. I grew up in a family that was all about sports, with 2 older brothers who all have black belts in judo. This made me a bit of a tomboy. Scott, on the other hand, was completely different. When we first met, his shirt buttons were mismatched, and he stumbled over his words during the toast. He was a nice guy, not a bad person at all, but he seemed to try hard and still couldn't get things quite right. I found this side of Scott sweet, and it brought out my caring side. We went on a few dates, and it was actually me who suggested we start dating. Scott had a way of calming my naturally short temper. Before I knew it, I started thinking I wanted to be with him forever. On the first anniversary of our relationship, I proposed to him. I said, "I'll take care of you for the rest of your life, so let's get married." Tears filled his eyes as he replied, "Julie, that's supposed to be my line. Thank you for everything. Let's continue to take care of each other." And that's how we decided to get married. When Scott first met my parents, he was completely nervous around my strict father and 2 brothers. My mom tried to calm him down, saying, "There's no need to be scared, you know." But Scott replied loudly, "Yes," and his voice cracked, which made the whole family laugh. My father, though strict, said, "He seems a bit unsure of himself, but I can tell he put a lot of thought into the gifts he brought. And it's clear he really loves Julie, which makes me happy." After meeting my family, it was time to meet Scott's family. He told me that his father had passed away from cancer 3 years ago. His parents had struggled with infertility, and after 6 years of trying, they finally had Scott. Normally, I wasn't the type to get nervous, but that day I felt really anxious about meeting his mother. I don't usually get nervous, but on this day, I was very anxious about meeting my mother-in-law. I couldn't stop worrying. What if she doesn't like me? What if I mess up when I greet her? What if she has an issue with our age difference? Just then, Scott, who usually isn't the most reassuring, said, "Don't worry, my mom is really kind. You'll find it easy to talk to her. She's famous in the neighborhood for always smiling." Hearing this made me feel a little better. He added, "And there's no way anyone could dislike you, Julie." His words lifted my mood. When we arrived at his family home, we rang the doorbell. I introduced myself. "Nice to meet you, Julie. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me today." His mother smiled warmly and said, "Oh, you must be Julie. No need to be so formal. Come on in." She was wearing a lovely dress and had a refined, gentle look. I was worried about the age difference, but when it came up, she said, "Age doesn't matter at all. I'm so happy that someone like you will be Scott's wife." All my fears went away. She didn't care about the age difference at all and was enthusiastic about everything I said. I had a great time. Our conversation turned to a story about a poodle my mother-in-law once had. She showed me a picture and said, "Isn't it adorable? I had this dog when I was in elementary school. It was such a friendly and smart dog, but it passed away when it got older." Then my husband added, "Mom, Julie isn't really fond of dogs." Shirley seemed surprised and said, "Julie, you don't like dogs?" I explained, "Yes, actually. Even though I'm a bit of a tomboy, I'm afraid of dogs. When I was a child, I was playing ball with my brother in the park, and a stray scary dog bit my arm when I went to get the ball. I bled a lot and needed 5 stitches. Since then, it's been a traumatic experience, and I've been scared of dogs." Shirley responded, "Oh my, I didn't know that. I'm so sorry for talking about dogs when you're afraid of them." I quickly said, No, I'm sorry for worrying you. The poodle in the picture was really cute. Shirley smiled and said, "Thank you." On the way home, I told Scott, "Your mother is so beautiful, kind, and such a wonderful person." He smiled and replied, "I know, right? My mom is always smiling and has such a gentle nature." I agreed, saying, "She's a lovely mother." We kept talking about his mother excitedly. Then suddenly, my husband became serious. "Actually, there's something I want to talk to you about," he said. "You know how we visited my family home today?" "Yes, it was such a big house." "I was really surprised," I replied. "Exactly," he continued. "When my dad was still alive, he designed it with my mom in mind, making sure everything was convenient for her. The house even has 4 children's rooms in case they had more kids, but since I'm an only child, they were never used. Now my mom is living there alone, and she finds it too big and lonely. So I was thinking, what if we live with her?" I was shocked by his unexpected idea. My eyes widened in surprise. It's true, the house was really big, and my mother-in-law kept it spotless. Living in such a house would be amazing. But we're newlyweds, and it feels a bit too soon for that. After thinking for a moment, I said, "Your mother is a wonderful person, and the house is so beautiful that it feels like too much for me. But we just got married, right? I'd like to enjoy our newlywed life, just the 2 of us, for a little while longer." "I see. You're right. I understand," he said. "I'll let my mom know." "Yes, I'm sorry. Please explain it to her gently." I felt a bit guilty towards Shirley, but I knew it was important to share my true feelings instead of just going along with everything. I was relieved that my husband seemed to understand and agree with me. Then our married life together began. Scott was still a bit clumsy, but he actively helped with house chores, and we were enjoying a happy and smooth life. However, recently, something has been bothering me a little. "Oh, hello, Mom?" Got it. "I'm coming over now," Scott said on the phone. "Your mom again?" I asked. "Yeah, the living room light bulb burned out. I'll go over and replace it." And off he went to his mom's house. Lately, it's been like this all the time. Mom bought a new computer, but she's having trouble setting it up, so I'm heading over to help. Or, Mom bought too many groceries at the supermarket, so she asked me to come pick her up. I'm going to help her out. Whether it was weekdays or weekends, the phone would ring, and Scott would head back to his mom's house more and more often. I started feeling a little upset, thinking that he could at least spend the weekends at home with me. But at the same time, I reminded myself that Scott is just a kind and thoughtful person who cares a lot about his mother. A month had passed since we got married, and just like when we were dating, we hadn't had any major arguments, and things were going smoothly. Today was Shirley's birthday. My husband and I had picked out a present and a cake for her, and we went to his parents' house. As soon as we walked in, a scary dog suddenly jumped out. "What?" I said, my eyes widening in surprise. There hadn't been a dog when we came for the wedding visit. Since I'm afraid of dogs, I quickly hid behind my husband. Shirley came out of the living room and said, "Oh, welcome. Mom, where did this scary dog come from?" Scott asked. "Well, I was feeling lonely living by myself, so I got a dog recently." "Isn't it cute?" she said, smiling. The dog was small, a Welsh corgi. "I see," I replied, still startled by the dog's sudden appearance. I forced a smile, even though I was scared. Without noticing my discomfort, Shirley brought the dog closer to me and said, "Come on, Julie, why don't you hold it?" I took a step back and said, I mentioned this when we came for the wedding visit, but I was bitten by a dog when I was younger, and I've been afraid of dogs ever since." I politely declined to hold the dog. "Oh, did you say that?" "I didn't know," she said, pretending not to remember. "But it's so cute. What a strange person you are." I noticed a slight smirk on her face, and for the first time, I wondered if Shirley was being sarcastic. After that day, whenever Scott said, "Mom wants to see you," or "Let's go visit my mom," I started declining. I still couldn't forget the smirk she gave me when she saw I was uncomfortable around the dog. A month later, after finishing work and coming home, I found my mother-in-law in the house. "What? Why are you here?" I asked, surprised. Oh, welcome home, she greeted me cheerfully, as if everything was normal. She was in the kitchen, had opened the fridge, and was cooking. Why did you come over so suddenly? I asked. My dear Scott said he wanted to eat my homemade stew, so I just had to come, she said, looking very happy as she hummed to herself. Oh, I see. I tried to smile, but I felt tense, especially since her dog was in the living room. To make things worse, she had fed the dog, and it was licking clean my favorite antique plate. I had bought that plate at a flea market in Canada, and now the dog was licking it clean. Who could possibly be okay with this? I went to my room to put away my bags and coat. I told myself not to get upset since Shirley had come all this way. I took a deep breath to calm down and went back to the living room. To my horror, the dog had made a mess on the brand new carpet. The stain was bright yellow. Oh no, the dog messed up the carpet. I shouted in a panic, but Shirley didn't seem to care. Oh dear, it made a mess right there. Huh, she said casually, not even bothering to scold the dog or clean it up. Knowing the stain would get worse if I didn't take care of it, I ended up cleaning it myself. I was usually calm, but this really frustrated me. Just then, I heard the door open, and my husband came home. The dog, hearing him, started barking loudly. Woof, woof. It barked until he came into the living room, and even the sound of the barking scared me. Once the dog saw it was my husband, it stopped, and I felt a bit of relief. The three of us sat down to eat the stew Shirley had made. Neither my husband nor Shirley bothered to put the dog in its cage, so it wandered around our feet, hoping for food. I felt tense and started trembling. Shirley noticed and said, "You really don't like dogs, do you, Julie? You look so scared. I brought the dog today to help you get over your fear." Bringing the dog here without asking, using my favorite plate, letting it mess up the carpet, and having it bark at me, how is any of this supposed to help me get over my fear? If anything, it made me hate dogs even more. In my mind, I was screaming, "If you really want to help, just put the dog in a cage or keep it away from me." But my husband didn't notice my discomfort at all. "Mom is so kind. She's really trying to help you, Julie," he said. I couldn't believe it. How was this kind? She was pretending to care, while actually making things worse for me. Then, to make things worse, my husband started to lecture me. "Julie, this isn't okay."
What?
"I'm the one at fault," I asked, shocked. "Mom has done all this for you, and yet you keep avoiding the dog. You won't even visit my parents' house because of the dog. You're not trying hard enough, Julie," my husband said. Since his mother was there, he started criticizing me more harshly than usual. I had no choice but to say, "I'm sorry," and apologize in front of my mother-in-law. I bit my lip, trying to hold back my frustration. After that, Shirley began coming to our house often, always bringing her dog. Each time, the dog would run around the house, making a mess. But Shirley never seemed to care or discipline the dog. These visits were stressing me out more and more. One day, I had enough. I gathered my courage and said, "Please, I've told you many times that I'm afraid of dogs. Can you stop bringing the dog here?" Shirley's face changed, and she suddenly looked angry. "I've been wondering," she snapped. "Are you using your fear of dogs as an excuse to avoid me, Julie? That's terrible." I was shocked and had no idea what she meant. But what surprised me even more was that my husband agreed with her. "Julie, that's too much. My mom has been thinking of you, and you've been avoiding her. That's really rude. Apologize to her." "Scott, Shirley, you both know I'm afraid of dogs, right? But you keep bringing the dog, and every time it makes a mess, I'm the one who has to clean it up. This is too much," I said, frustrated. Shirley frowned and said, "At least let me enjoy my time with the dog. You're too old to have kids anyway, so what's the harm?" I was stunned. "Is that what you really think?" I asked. "Isn't it true? You're already 37, and it's getting harder to have a baby at your age. But my son is only 32. He has his whole future ahead of him, but now he's stuck with an older, arrogant wife," she muttered. This was the same woman who once told me age didn't matter. Hearing her true feelings shocked me. I couldn't bear to have her around any longer, so I said, "Please, don't come here again." My eyes filled with tears, and maybe because of that, Shirley got even more upset. "How dare you? You really are an arrogant wife," she shouted before storming out with her dog. From that day on, I started feeling more and more resentment toward both my husband and Shirley. Ever since my husband defended her and blamed me, things between us had been tense, and we barely spoke to each other anymore. 2 weekends, my husband came to me with a serious look on his face. "Julie, I'm sorry," he began. "I was wrong too. I should have thought more about your feelings," Scott said. I felt relieved, thinking he finally understood how I felt. But then he added, "Let's go apologize to Mom now." "What? Why should we do that? Was I wrong that day?" I asked, confused. "It's not about being right or wrong. Don't make Mom angry. Just apologize, please," he said. In the end, my husband didn't understand anything. He didn't care about my feelings at all. He took me to his parents' house against my will. When we got there, Shirley was waiting for me, hands on her hips. Shirley, I'm sorry about the other day," I said, as my husband had told me to, just to calm her down. But then she said, "I'll forgive you if you hold the dog." That was it. I realized I couldn't reason with her. I had apologized, even though I wasn't wrong, and I had tried to meet her halfway many times. And this was her response? "As I've said before, I can't do that," I replied firmly, keeping my cool. Shirley got angry and forcefully pushed the dog toward me. "Ah!" I cried out and instinctively pushed the dog away. But my scream startled the dog, and it bit my hand. It hurt so much, and my hand was quickly covered in blood. "Please do something," I begged my husband and Shirley. But Shirley just said, "Well, anyone would be scared by such a loud noise." Poor thing, focusing only on the dog. To my shock, my husband was more concerned about whether the floor was dirty. Neither of them cared about me. I felt disgusted. Meanwhile, my hand kept bleeding, and I had to shoo the dog away myself. I decided to call an ambulance. When the ambulance arrived, Shirley scoffed, "Oh, come on. You're being so dramatic over a dog bite," looking at me with a mocking expression. My husband, even as the ambulance showed up, didn't change. He was still checking the floor. Ignoring both of them, I got into the ambulance, pressing my bleeding hand. I was filled with anger, pain, and sadness. I couldn't stop crying as I sat alone in the ambulance. For some reason, my husband called me while I was being taken to the hospital. I thought maybe he was finally worried about me, so I answered the phone. But instead, he said, "Mom got bitten by the dog. You're still nearby, right? Tell the driver to come back to our house." Hearing those words, I felt my feelings for my husband start to disappear. I didn't care anymore what happened to him or his mother. Let them deal with it on their own. I quietly hung up the phone. When I got to the hospital and the doctor checked my wound, he said it was deeper than expected and I would need to stay in the hospital. Since I wasn't ready for this, I called my parents and asked them to bring some things for me. After a while, my parents arrived. "Julie, are you okay?" they asked, their faces full of worry as they looked at me lying in bed. "I'm sorry for making you worry. It still hurts a little, but I'm okay for now," I replied. "I see. When we heard you were taken to the hospital, we were really worried." "What happened?" they asked. I told them everything about how my mother-in-law and husband had acted. My mom hugged me and said, "You did well." I had been feeling so alone, but just being able to talk to them made me feel better. However, my dad was furious after hearing the story. "I will never forgive them," he said angrily. He looked like he was about to explode with rage. The next day, my husband called. Scott was also furious. "What the hell is going on? The police just showed up at our house, and now my mom is being questioned." "I don't know. Maybe the hospital reported it. They asked me how I got hurt, so I told them it was your mom's dog that bit me." "What? What if my mom gets arrested? This is your fault for being careless in the first place." "Yeah, I figured you'd blame me," I said, "but I don't care anymore. Actually, there's something I've been meaning to tell you. Let's get a divorce." "What?" "We've only been married for 4 months. Getting divorced so soon? Everyone at work and our family will laugh at us. It's embarrassing." "I'm not divorcing you," he said angrily, and hung up the phone. 2 weeks later, I was discharged from the hospital. My parents came to pick me up, and I decided to go back to their house with them. After that, I talked to a lawyer about the divorce and asking for alimony from my husband since there was no way to reason with him. Even though my husband kept calling me, I ignored all his calls. Eventually, after missing another call, I got a text message from him saying, "I'm at the cafe near your parents' house. You better come." If he really wanted to talk, he could have come to the house, but he didn't. It was clear he didn't want to face my parents. With no other choice, I went to the cafe. The first thing my husband said was, "I'm not getting a divorce. I don't care what you want. I am getting a divorce. There's no way I want to stay with you or your mother after everything that's happened." I replied, "Don't speak badly of my mother. This is your fault. You avoided my mom because you said you were afraid of dogs, and the dog bit you because you screamed," he said, continuing to lecture me. Just then, my father and two brothers arrived at the cafe. Before coming, I had told my father about the message from my husband, and he had called my brothers to come along. Surrounded by three large men who practiced judo, Scott's voice shook as he said, "Oh, father-in-law, brothers-in-law." The way he cowered was almost funny. My father spoke up, "How dare you hurt my daughter? Our sister wants a divorce. You're going to give it to her, right?" They all stared at him with intense eyes. Terrified, Scott stuttered, Yes." My father and brothers kept pushing him until he finally agreed to the divorce and to pay alimony. I handed him the divorce papers I had already prepared and said, "Sign these. We're getting divorced." Reluctantly, my husband signed the papers, and I left the cafe. Thanks to the support of my father and brothers, I successfully divorced my husband and received alimony from him. My lawyer also demanded compensation from my former mother-in-law for my injuries, and I got alimony from her as well. Later, I heard that my ex-mother-in-law had been questioned by the police about the dog bite. She got a strict warning and had to give up the dog. Apparently, she spoiled the dog so much that it started thinking it was stronger than humans. After it bit me, it also bit her, and she ended up with a broken wrist. Now, she's living uncomfortably with limited use of her wrist. My ex-husband moved back to his parents' house. With his mother unable to use her wrist properly, she would ask, "Scott, can you help with the laundry? Can you cook for me?" But since Scott had never done housework before, he couldn't do anything on his own. This caused constant fights between them, with my ex-husband blaming her, saying, "It's your fault this happened in the first place." They began arguing regularly. Meanwhile, rumors spread among his relatives and coworkers that he got divorced because he treated me badly. His pride was hurt, and well, it served him right. I was the one who started those rumors. While I was in the hospital, I shared the story with one of his coworkers whose contact info I had. This coworker was known for loving gossip, so I purposely told them. It worked perfectly. The coworker spread the word about my ex-husband's behavior, calling him abusive, a mama's boy, and someone who had been divorced. It made him an easy target at work, and honestly, he deserved it. With the support of my parents and brothers, I'm now living a happy life. How did you like this story? Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See